Freemasonry.
Oh, wow. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Thanks for taking the time to be here. Appreciate your support and your viewership. And I always get excited when you are here, willing to learn and learn with me together, read these books, pull out the babies out of all these sources, and put the history together with me. We're going to continue reading today a book, very provocative, controversial, but interesting book. You know, we just surfing the wave. Eventually, the truth will come out. We just digging. You know, this book is called "The Princess and the Prophet: The Secret History of Magic, Race, and Black Muslims in America" by Jacob S. Dorman. All right. Again, that's the book right here. We read chapters like 1 and 2 already. So this is part 1, or the first 2 chapters from this book that we read. This is the video right here I did. This is the thumbnail. In case you missed it, make sure to catch it so you can have the context of anything we read or say today. The video is called The Great Arma Sotanki, or Walter Brister. That's what we're going to be talking about again today a little bit. The Princess and the Prophet in Old Kentucky. This is about 2 weeks ago, right? So make sure to catch that. We were live that day. I'm going to go back to the book. So we go to chapter 3 of this book, and it's called Muslim Masons. And it says here, the same year that Walter Brister began leading the Pickaninny band in the hijinks and strained merrymaking of an old Kentucky on Broadway, a very different vision of the Black past was unfurling in Chicago, one that presented a facsimile of the Muslim world, complete with dozens of performers who were Negroes, in parentheses, in American terms. All right. So, all right, just brief. If you missed the first video, Walter Brister, he's the guy. He was a performer, magician, in these circuses, and he was also a performer in Broadway when he was a child in a show called In Old Kentucky. This is stuff we went over in video 1. And the controversial conspiracy part, which a lot of people might have a lot of problems with, is that he might be either related or associated or is Noble Drew Ali, all right, in his previous life. The Chicago's World's Columbian Exposition of 1893 drew 27 million admissions during the 6 months it was open between May and October. Wow. Now you guys know about the World's Fairs, right? What they doing? Reprogramming the inheritors, the incubator babies after the reset. Why is this also a part of that? This fake so-called, like this whole, oh, I'm a Arabian mystic, Muslim magician, sorcerer, shaman, esoteric, all-knowing, mysterious person. This is what they were like a movie character, like Hollywood. So this is what they were saying. Remember, this is what we read. There's a lot of these popping up in the so-called Muslim world of U.S. Dozens of performers who were so-called Negroes. And this was happening in the Chicago's World Columbian Exposition of 1893. Now we know why there was a place called Morocco in the Chicago's World Fair. Let's go to that. So the Chicago's World Fair, right? I know a lot of you know about this stuff, maybe some of you don't know about what a World Fair is. We're gonna have some videos on this. Don't worry, I have mentioned it before. In different videos. A lot of you do know a lot. This is Chicago right here, the Chicago World's Fair. Okay, and this is what they were talking about. This place right here. Look what it looked like, right? Just like ancient so-called Rome, or right. And this is the true old world. This is what was here already. They try to say that they built this temporarily, and that this is just some plywood and wood underneath all that. That's just fake. That is fake. But we know better. So I just want to show you that in this Chicago World's Fair, they did have like it says here, Oriental Village, as you guys see, so-called Moorish architecture. Here it says 1933 Chicago World's Fair through Morocco with Belgian Village. All right, it says Morocco Building, Chicago World's Fair 1933. So I'm just bringing this up because just to give you perspective, right? They're saying that these people are starting out in the World's Fair in Chicago, right? They're grabbing, people from the street, from the hood, right there in Chicago, New York, from wherever in the States, and they're dressing them like so-called Muslims, like they're these mystic people from ancient Egypt over there in the other side of the world, and they're over here acting and doing, the whole show, right? But these are regular black folks, might not even be associated to that part of the world at all. They might have a whole different genealogy. Okay, so this is what they're trying to tell you. Okay, we're gonna look at some maps of the Chicago World's Fair. So in this map, I just want to show you where it says here, index to midway uh, places. You'll see Morocco exhibits. This is the same map, just more closer. I just want to show you guys. So here's more close. It says Morocco exhibits, as you guys see. Indian village, Roman house, Moorish palace, street in Cairo, Algerian Tunis, Turkish village, okay, right? Tunisian village. See, this is what they had. Regular black folks in a lot of the times dressed up as these people. This is what I'm trying to explain to you. This is what they're telling you. The Chicago World's Fair is what they're talking about. All right, Morocco building. Morocco, Chicago's World Fair. They're dressing up so-called black folks as Muslims, as Oriental people. So going back to the book again, as they were telling you, in Chicago, in the Chicago's World Fair, is that they presented a facsimile of the Muslim world, a facsimile, an exact copy, they're saying, complete with dozens of performers who were Negroes in American terms. All right. So let's just keep reading. It said Chicago's World Columbian Exposition of 1893 drew 27 million admissions during the 6 months it was open by between May and October, a figure that was equivalent to 1/4 of the residents of the United States. You guys hear that? Wow, a lot of 27 million admissions. 1893, I was showing you the 1933 map. I didn't show you the 1893 one. We'll get that in future videos I'm going to do. But imagine, way back in 1893, 27 million admissions, equivalent to 1/4 of the residents of the United States, although many of those were repeat visitors. Crowds thronged to see the white city of dazzling white neoclassical plaster-covered buildings. They say in plaster-covered, see, they try and say it's fake, dedicated to the areas of industry and human endeavor. To stroll the crowded midway plazons and to take in the boat parades on the man-made lagoon surrounding the ornate buildings on the shores of oceanic Lake Michigan, visitors viewed the neoclassical statues dedicated to industry and other virtues and stood in line to admire the vistas from the world's first Ferris wheel, a gargantuan contraption with compartments as big as streetcars that hoisted fairgoers 260 feet in the air. America's greatest landscape architect, Frederick Law Olmsted. You know, this is what they're trying to, we got Dutch the hijack. We don't even know if these people really build this stuff or they just the ones getting the credit. These builders could have already been there. And that's the whole thing about the people doing videos about the World's Fairs and, the reset and old world buildings and all that. So That's what I'm talking about. But again, be ready to dodge some hijack. It says he was the designer of New York's Central Park and San Francisco's Golden Gate Park, planned the fairgrounds in Chicago's Jackson Park, complete with lagoons and canals designed to set off the fair's buildings and provide room for boat races and pleasure boating. So I could believe that he did the fake canals and all that, maybe. So they're saying he didn't build the buildings, though. Okay, I get it. Now you're talking about the landscaping. Oh, okay. A select group of the nation's leading architects designed impressive neoclassical buildings. Okay, so now here comes the architects. Yeah, you mean the Mason architects arranged like over decorated white wedding cakes around Olmsted Central Lagoon. To the west, past the various rings of the main fairgrounds, was the rowdy and populous pleasure ground of the Midway Plaisance. The Midway connecting Jackson Park on the lake with Washington Park to the west was a strip of land about 1 mile long and 800 feet wide, containing 1,440 concessions, three-quarters of which were owned or operated by a few of the 1,650 foreigners who took part as salesmen, musicians, or natives. You see, in parentheses, pretending to be indigenous people from any part of the world. The official guide to the Midway claimed that if its attractions were stretched in a straight line, they would extend more than 6 miles, and the U.S. Customs Office estimated that visitors to the Midway spent over 7 million on its attractions. They were making money of rewriting history over here, mostly in 10 and 25-cent increments. Wow. 7 million in 10 to 25-cent increments. And 7 million in those times is a lot. Observer Frank H. Smith deemed the concourse a human kaleidoscope, featuring representatives of every country in the world, both civilian and barbarian, all following their vocations and mingling together as a happy family. A truly wonderful sight that was at times bordering on pandemonium, but withal producing a happy sensation of enjoyment nowhere else experienced. Groups of Inuits sweated in their fur coats in the summer heat, while ornately costumed Balinese dancers shimmied, and Norwegian Laplanders tended their overheated reindeer. There were two Irish exhibits, a sprawling German village, a Viennese village, and Turkish, Egyptian, and Algerian concessions, among many others from a Swiss village to a Dahomeyan village with Africans performing music and dances. All right. They might have even grabbed some folk from the neighborhoods in the States, right, to perform as so called Africans, you know. Um, but you see how they're doing, they like mistreating the animals, making people be all hot, like exhibiting people like they're, a show, like a sideshow, right? In a circus, right? This is what they were doing back then, right? Human zoos and all of that, right? Despite various historians' claims to the contrary, there was no rhyme or reason to where these people were located. Aside from a clustering of some of the representatives of Muslim countries, which occupied a prominent place close to the fairground at the center of the strip, far from being a didactic display that demonstrated the superiority of the West, the Midway was a chaotic and confusing pleasure zone that blurred categorical distinctions between East and West, familiar and foreign, created a human kaleidoscope that tumbled together diverse peoples in a disorienting and dazzling array. There have been other world fairs, an observer for the Daily Intern Ocean opined, but there never before was a midway, a spot where the lines of longitude and the parallels of latitude were tangled together like a skein of silk after a kitten's play, where the Occident and the Orient were mixed in the most gigantic amusement, potpourri, the world has ever seen. Potpourri. It all combined to give a polyglot effect, confusing but in the main pleasing. The many Muslim exhibitions, all right, many Muslim exhibitions, these are just exhibitions in the world's fairs. This is what they're doing, their reset and all that, became the Midway's most popular sites. Became what? This is in 1893. I was showing you the 1933. So how many years were they doing this for, guys? They were the what? The most popular sites. These exhibitions, acting, a show, act, show, entertainment. They were the most popular. And together they lent the Midway and Islamic Orientalist flavor. The Algerian and Tunisian village, the Persian palace, the street in Cairo, the Moorish palace, and the Turkish theater displayed Oriental finery, Islamic arts, and most scandalously, gyrating, dancing women, and loose fitting costumes. Ha! Nor did the Islamic entertainment stop with the Midway itself. Outside the Midway, Buffalo Bill's Wild West show featured the Hassan ben Ali troupe of Moroccan acrobats. Remember, we read about them, right? And one whirling dervish with 8 accompanying veiled wives, while a group of Syrian horsemen and camel riders, dubiously billed as Bedouins, encamped on a nearby baseball field until they found space at the edge of the Midway to demonstrate their impressive riding skills as the Wild East Show. The Wild East Show. The street in Cairo was the most popular exhibition of the Midway and was consistently thronged with visitors. The street presented a picturesque oriental facade with gaily colored buildings painted grayish yellow and striped with muted tones of green and red, and with overhanging second-story window casements enclosed in lattice work, bringing to mind the enclosed harem spaces of Cairo, even if there were only 11 women among the more than 175 performers in the Egyptian village. Numerous visitors remarked that it felt as if they were transported to Cairo itself, with the brightly colored buildings and people, the brilliant rugs and tapestries for sale, the groups of men puffing on water pipes, the crowds of noisy children, and the big, plodding, smelly animals. 20 donkeys, 7 camels, and assorted snakes and monkeys formed the streets menagerie, all imported from Alexandria, Egypt, along with their human handlers. Clowns managed to get laughs with slapstick antics, slapping each other in the face, fighting duels with monkeys, and telling jokes. Roaming groups of swordsmen, wrestlers, and musicians performed for tips, while jugglers and small boys executed acrobatic flips. Magicians roamed the streets, making objects disappear from audience members' hands and reappear in their ears. Snake charmers, magicians, and fortune tellers charged an extra admission into their tents scattered throughout the Egyptian exhibition. All right, they were hustling. These so-called magicians and fortune tellers, they're like, "Oh, you gotta pay a little extra to come to my tent." All right, scattered throughout the whole exhibition. We got a whole neighborhood here. We got a whole like like underworld going on and everything. By intention, the colorfulness and exoticness of the costumes of Muslim lands and the hundreds of native performers lent this slice of Chicago the air of a Middle Eastern bazaar, all right, in Chicago in the World's Fair, with numerous performers vying for the attention and coins of passersby and drumming up business in many languages. Sideshow barkers and food vendors shouted over the din of the thousands of jostling visitors enticed by strange smelling foods, fine teas, and foreign wares. One journalist attested that everyone visited the Midway plazons, and what a picture that road down the center presented. Regardless of the day of the week, one met people of all nations, all stations, all classes, and all dressed in holiday attire. At a time when American clothing was generally quite drab. Quite drab, these incubators they didn't dress good. The visitors from Islamic countries presented a riot of color and exotic dress. There were Turks in European costume with red fezes, and Turks in all the glory of rich silk turbans, purple silk mantles, and yellow silk trousers. Arabs in long, pale tan colored robes embroidered in gold, and in long silk robes covered with gold lace. As the official guide to the Midway described the Egyptian exhibit, only a few steps from the crowded roadway, the visitors found him or herself in a busy thoroughfare in ancient Egypt, where the architecture, the surroundings, and the people were as far removed from anything American as could well be imagined. The narrow bending street offered oriental buildings, picturesque shops, and quaint overhanging upper stories. Curiosity seekers crowded the shop windows, facing the street in olive skinned Egyptians, fair skinned Greeks, that's the hijack, and sable hued Sudanese mingled with the visitors all around. There was merry laughter on all sides. One visitor observed, and for a few minutes at least you are lost to all consciousness of being in that extremely modern city called Chicago. In other words, the Midway created a dizzying collapse of time, space, and even racial hierarchies. Contemporaries could understand themselves not just to be traveling to another place, but also to be traveling back in time to ancient Egypt. And that's why I say dodge the hijack, because this is the picture they were painting. That's not what the people, look like back in ancient Egypt or were. All right. They're trying to say, oh, this is how Egypt in modern times look. Nah, we're talking about Tamari. You're talking about ancient Egypt. You got to show areas like the Southeast, Mexico, South America. Apart from the modernity of Chicago, the street in Cairo even had a display devoted to the time of the pharaohs, complete with mummies. The sacred as well as the profane was on display at the street in Cairo. The muezzin issued a call to prayer several times a day from the mosque minaret, and spectators were allowed to watch prayers from the gallery. Likewise, visitors watched an imam instruct the boys in daily lessons in the Quran and Arabic penmanship. A performer played the role of Gamal el-Din el-Jabi, a Mohammedan of the time, who was said to own a stately house in the middle of the street and who ostentatiously demonstrated the hospitality of the Muslim world for quizzical American passersby. Denton J. Snyder, an independent Hegelian scholar from St. Louis, wrote about the Midway as an expression of specifically Islamic culture. The Greek spirit in its best form still rules largely in the exposition proper, but in the pleasance it is Allah who is supermaning. Allah Akbar's with Muhammad as his prophet. He commented, so the student is led to have a desperate grapple with Allah if he is going to grasp this world's fare. The Allah of Muhammad is the one God in whom all individuals are one or must make themselves one by an act of will, which is resignation, Snyder classified the Hebrew Bible, and consequently Judaism, Christianity, and Islam as Oriental, and viewed the Orient and its alleged idea of lapse as a necessary counterbalance to Occidental obsessions with ascent and progress. We have to keep and lay to heart this Oriental contribution to our Western world. Very necessary indeed is it, a great corrective of our one-sidedness and egoism. At Chicago's Midway, the Muslim East came west. Continuing, it says here, one of the most consequential events of the Chicago's World's Fair in terms of its lasting impact on American culture, listen to this, guys, was the transmission of the rituals of the Shriners to Americans of African descent. Okay? And that's why somebody, whoever had this book, the physical copy, highlighted this part. Again, pay attention. This is what I'm saying. These movements don't just come out of nowhere. One of the most consequential events at the Chicago's World Fair, where they're resetting, where they're teaching these incubator babies, when they're, repopulating the earth and all that, with them. There was already people here populated. So one of the most consequential events at the Chicago's World's Fair in terms of its lasting impact on American culture was the transmission of the rituals of the Shriners to Americans of African descent. Well known New York thespian William J. Billy Florence and a prominent Masonic and devoted Arabic scholar, Dr. Walter M. Fleming, founded the Shriners, or the ancient Arabic order of the nobles of the mystic shrine for North America in 1872. No secret society had been more deeply immersed in the mythology and magical legends of the Islamic Orient. Although not properly speaking a Masonic organization, the Shriners were only open to those who had achieved the highest degrees of Freemasonry. The nobles of the mystic shrine called themselves the playground of Freemasonry and sought to embody a spirit of Oriental decadence and frivolity, balanced by charitable works. Frivolity. The order took off in 1878 when the founders hired Albert Rawson, an Orientalist expert and friend of the Theosophist Madame Blavatsky. Listen, wow! Body bag for the illusion. Yo, shout out to Drop. Yo, you guys don't even know, or do you remember why I'm so like, yeah, you guys don't understand it. But if you have been watching me, if you know my No More Misunderstanding series, what I did way back, and how we connected that the master teacher to Madame Blavatsky, right? Jamal Afghani. You guys remember I have a video on this. Jamal Afghani is also was one of the master teachers or the people he went to get initiated with. We're talking about Noble Drew Ali. Yeah, one of his master teachers. He went to get initiated by him whenever he went to the Egypt or India, you know. Right, so real quick, major drop, right? It's just all these connections. Wow. I mean, man, I'm starting to see a real clear picture here, guys. Now, this is the guy I'm talking about, Jamal al-Din al-Afghani. All right, that's him right there, right? Born in 1839, Afghanistan, died in 1897, all right? He's like, wow. Political activist and Islamic ideologist who traveled throughout the Muslim world during the late 19th century as one of the founders of Islamic modernism. Okay? All right? Because while in Egypt, Afghani sought the removal of the ruling regime of Ismail Pasha of Egypt, which he viewed as pro-British, and used Freemasonry as an organizational base for his political activities. All right, he perceived Freemasonry as a means of advancing his anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, pan-Islamic causes. Pan-Islamic, bro, very biased. Pan-Islamic, a movement. All right. And more further down here, it says Theosophy. Theosophy. It says Afghani as Haji Sharif, who inspired Saint Yves de Alvedre in Legend of Agartha and Synarchy. All right, it's a real person. These ascended masters. It was him portraying himself as something else. Okay, it says according to K. Paul Johnson, the masters revealed H.P. Blavatsky's master were real people. And Serapis Bey, that's another name for him. He was Serapis Bey, guys, was Jamal Afghani. Remember, this is in my video. I'm going to show you which one. As a purported leader of an order named the Brotherhood of Luxor. Okay, Afghani was introduced to the Star of the East Lodge, of which he became the leader of its founder, Raphael Bork, and the British Council in Cairo, who was in communication with Blavatsky. Afghani's friend, a Jewish Italian actor, Cheza, from Cairo, named James Sanua, who with his girlfriend Lydia Pashkov and their friend Lady Jane Digby were travel companions of Blavatsky. All right, it's a big brotherhood, and you're not part of it. As concluded by Jocelyn Goodwin in the Theosophical Enlightenment, if we interpret the Brotherhood of Luxor to refer to the coterie of esotericists and magicians that Blavatsky knew and worked with in Egypt, then we should probably count Sanua and Jamal ad-Din as members. All right, again, the master teacher or adept of Blavatsky. And this is my video. Make sure you watch it if you haven't seen it, guys. Make sure you catch up, right? This is my video. It says Jamal al-Din Afghani, mystic Sufi, Eastern Order, master adept of Noble Drew Ali, and Blavatsky. There's a connection there. They had the same master teacher. Yeah, and the order that we are reading about right now in the book, Drew Ali was part of that mystic ancient order. Okay, the same one that we're talking about here in the book. So again, this is the video. Make sure to watch this. It's only 28 minutes long. It's part of a longer video, but I shortened it just for this topic right here, so you guys can go ahead and just get this drop. All right, going back to the book again. This Islamic I, Oriental movement or influence, all right, this order, the Arabic order of the nobles of the mystic shrine of North America, took off when? In 1878, when the founders hired Albert Rossen, an Orientalist expert and friends of Theosophist Madame Blavatsky, and determined to decorate it with all the mysticism of the Orient and a certain degree of mystery. All right, Blavatsky connected with this pan. Wow, Islamic, right? These are your seeds, guys. You understand what I'm showing? These are seeds to whatever, when you get your Moorish science, then you get your Nation of Islam and all the other, yeah, Malachite, York, yeah. This is the seeds, right? There's people working behind the scenes, creating these movements and people being used as people that look like you, says mocking the solemnity of the Western Orientalist quest for authenticity in the East and the absurdities of fraternal regalia. And hula babalu, the Shriners created an intentionally fraudulent legend linking their secret order back to Ali, the son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad, in the city of Mecca in 644. The silly miniature vehicles that fez wearing nobles rode in their parades, listen, invited their audiences to release their westernized workaday woes and enjoy a carefree, absurd Orientalist spectacle. Spectacle. It's a show. Spectacle. Intent on having a good time, supporting charitable projects, and enjoying the flesh pots of Egypt as literally as possible. The fake North American nobles seldom took their own legends very seriously. Even their own historians speak of the liberties taken with their Genesis story. The placing of the origin of this order at Mecca is a fancy of the imagination which historians in general have a license to claim use of. One Shriner historian wrote in 1906 referring to the rites of the order as a compilation of facts and fancies, which subsequently were handed out to a waiting and anxious constituency. Oh, people who didn't know any better and were desperate. The compilation of what? Truth and lies and fancies, facts and fit. Compilation. That's you're giving me some truth and then you're giving me some hijack. You're adding your hijack. You're trying to influence me to think a different way because I don't know any better. And we're in desperate times. There have been disfranchised black folks that are being relocated, moved around. You know, there's racial segregation going on, all this stuff in the early 1900s, right? Reconstruction, did all that, the reset, you know what I'm saying? All that. The Shriners' fancies had a distinctly Orientalist flavor, describing Muslim lands with exotic and erotic language, as in the following passage. Looking backward toward the home of the order, we find the brotherhood in Egypt flourishing and fruitful in good works, as beautiful as are the queenly palms which wave their feathery arms in the soft airs that crinkle the surface of the lordly Nile into rippling lines of loveliest corrugations or cast their cooling shadows upon the star-eyed daughters of Egypt. This kind of Orientalist fantasy was so overwrought that it did not disguise its air of winking and slightly salacious irreverence, which fit with the air of droll irony that became part of American masculine culture in the wake of the horror of the Civil War. All right, listen, the horror of the Civil War, everything is all planned. Everything happens for a reason. Like they say, oh, we're going to have a Civil War, and then because of that, people are going to be living in this situation. After that, then we can grab them and create these world fairs, and then we can create all these movements. Get it? The order's costumes also embodied Western Orientalist ideas of the East. The nobles wore rich costumes of Eastern character, made of silk and brocaded velvet, or brocaded, of Oriental intensity of color, topped with a fez. All right, with a fez. topped with a fez. According to the Shriners, the wearing of the fez originated from the time when the Crusades interrupted the Hajj to Mecca around 960 AD, and Mohammedans west of the Nile journeyed to the city of Fez in Morocco instead. Shriners' myths were loosely based in Islamic history, but included many inaccuracies, truths with lies. As a center of Islamic learning, Fez has long been a destination for travelers searching for knowledge. Talab al-Im, Jerusalem was sometimes used as a Hajj destination when Muslims have been unable to visit Mecca, but Fez never served a similar purpose. As historian Susan Nance explains, the Shriners' rites were not a simple mockery of Islam, but were part of a late 19th century masculine burlesque of reverence and satirized the feminizing influence of theosophists and other Western admirers of Eastern spirituality. Like many popular arts and amusements in the 19th century, the shrine ritual could be all things to all men, she writes. Whether initiates sought relief from the seriousness of Masonry, a humorous interpretation of exotic travel narratives, or just a light-hearted elite fraternal experience, whether they despised the Muslim Arabia, romanticized it, or were indifferent to it, they could all find their own meaning in the tricks and skits of the Muslim shrine. In the Islamic Orient, all roads lead not to Rome but to Mecca, and the Shriners appropriately began with Mecca Temple in New York City on September 26, 1872. Listen, it would be 4 years before they expanded, but when they did, they swept across the land, littering America with a strange poetry of Arabic named shrines. In 1876, the year that a disputed presidential election led to the withdrawal of federal troops from the South and the end of Reconstruction, Shriners founded the Mosque Temple in Rochester, New York, Mount Sinai in Montpelier, Vermont, and Al Quran in Cleveland, Ohio. The year of the Compromise of 1877 brought the Oriental Temple to Troy, New York, and similarly orientally named temples in Cincinnati, the Northeast, and the Midwest. The nobles spread to the West Coast in 1883 with the opening of Islam Temple in San Francisco. They're running into Wally there, huh? But the center of the movement remained the East Coast and Midwest, where there were 4 or 5 new temples almost every year of the 1880s. All right, this is all before Drew Ali. All right, and we're gonna get into the who are these people. We're gonna see. We're gonna see, guys. Is gonna watch with names like Osman, Jerusalem, Palestine, El Kahir, Mullah, and Abdallah. There were also a spate of ancient Egyptian names such as Osiris, Ramesses, and Isis. The Alhambra Lodge landed in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and residents of Fargo, North Dakota, cavorted at El Sagal. The year 1890 witnessed the Battle of Wounded Knee, the last major battle and massacre of Indian peoples by U.S. soldiers. While in other parts of the West, men playing Muslims founded El Kala in Salt Lake City, El Khatib in Spokane, all right? What? Men playing Muslims, people pretending to be Muslims. By the end of the year, there were 16,980 Shriners nationwide. By the end of the year, 1890. All right, that's how many Shriners there were already. And new chapters in Erie, Pennsylvania, and Birmingham, Alabama, with many more to follow, right? Canaanite Temple, Newark. By the time the World's Columbian Exposition opened in 1893, there were 63 shrines nationwide with almost 23,000 members. All right. And by the time it closed, there were 4 more chapters, all before the Canaanite Temple, but that was the influence. That's why he started a temple. That's a Shriner. The Shriners continued expanding at this breakneck pace for the next many decades. Many decades, all right? And by the time they published their official history of the Imperial Council in 1621, there were a total of 154 chapters at the time when the country as a whole had only 58 metropolitan areas. Wow. They sported such exotic Oriental names as Bedouin, Arabia, Qasim, Salam, Luxor, Cairo, Alcazar, and perhaps strangest of all, Jackson, Mississippi's Wahhabi, founded on July 12, 1911. Notably, they all remain in the continental United States, except for places where large numbers of U.S. citizens sojourned for commercial reasons, like Honolulu, Winnipeg, Mexico City, London, Ontario, and Panama. There's lodges in Panama. Unlike other streams of Freemasonry, which started in Scotland and embellished upon legends drawn from Central Europe, the Shriners were a distinctively American version of Freemasonry that drew on romantic Orientalist legends at a time when America itself was bursting onto the world stage as a major industrial, cultural, military, and colonial power, while simultaneously suppressing Americans of African descent. That's the hijack. Just so-called Black Americans suppressing, all right, through new systems of segregation and disenfranchisement. This disenfranchised the black man, so-called black man. Yeah, he was the one who was franchised. He was the one who had all the lands, who were the senators, who were the governors, who were the founders, who were the Indians. Yeah. There is no simple correlation between Shrinerdom and the new imperialism, however. Through subversive laughter and ribald parodies of Islam, some of the country's most prominent men ridiculed the Victorian hypocrisies of their own society, using the carefree, potent, and appealing mythology of the Muslim East. Continuing, it says the Midway's Muslim diaspora in general, they're talking about here in the World's Fair, right, in Chicago, 1893. In general, in its street in Cairo, in particular, contained all the elements of Egyptology and romantic Orientalism that were the stock and trade of the Shriners. This is what they were hustling, these Shriners, these Masons, these pre-Drualis. Oh man, the founders before him, right? People who's passing this on to Ali, that he was influenced by, right? How did he just get into all this, right? And then remember the stories of him being a magician. Now we understand where in the world's fairs, and also he traveled in certain circuses. So in these world fairs, no wonder they're making mad money over here. They're making a lot of money over here. This was the stock and trade of the Shriners. The stock and trade of the Shriners. Chicago's Medina Temple of the Nobles of the Mystic Shrine co-sponsored the Turkish mosque. The Sultan of Turkey, Abdul Hamid, was the other co-sponsor. All right? Hamid had intended to provide a place on the fairgrounds where Muslims might worship without molestation, but the Shriners had more light-hearted ideas. Medina Shrine sent invitations to shrines across the country, and representatives from New York, Milwaukee, Indianapolis, Cedar Rapids, and Grand Rapids attended, 2,000 strong. All the Shriners wore bright red fezzes emblazoned with a crescent moon, and they included a contingent of an Arab guard dressed in suave fashion with fezzes, okay, vest and baggy pantaloons, followed by the 200 members of the Turkish delegation wearing fezzes or gorgeous silk turbans. All right. So again, fezzes emblazoned with a crescent moon. A large number of Syrian riders from the Wild East show, dressed as turbaned Bedouins, astride camels, and magnificent Arabian horses, provided additional interest. Together, the Turkish villagers and the visiting Shriners paraded all the way from the exposition train station through the length of the Midway plazas and into the Turkish village. One woman observing the Shriners and Turks parade remarked that the Turks looked just like Americans. The Turks look just like what? The Turks look what? She said, wait, but these guys look that look like Mr. Williams down the street. What did you wait? I didn't know he was a Shriner and Muslim from the Orient. So this woman said they all look like Americans. When told that most of the Turks were indeed Americans, the disappointed woman told her husband that the foreigners were frauds. These were black folks. Listen, guys, playing Shriners and Turks, huh? When the parade reached the mosque, the real Turks, most of whom were Jews, Chazars, these Turks were Chazars, took off their slippers and fell to their knees in prayer while the Shriners rushed in with their shoes on as spectators. They didn't care about that religious part. They're Masons, not religious people. After the Muezzin, Osin Bey issued the weird prayer with something of the sweetness of a jodel in its intonation. The Turkish drum corps beat out a frenzied crescendo. The Shriner band, caught up in what is thought was the spirit of the moment, kicked into high gear as one of the Turkish officials tried and failed to hush the band, playing popular numbers such as the Bowery and the Tarara Boom Deai. The Turks played or prayed foreheads to the ground as the Shriners from Muslim temple in Detroit, the Shriners from where? Detroit, from Detroit and others watched. They ain't doing the praying. At the end of the nobles' visit to the Shriners' Ottoman mosque on the Midway, this is the exhibition. We're not talking about real, like this is the exhibits, right? This is a spectacle, right? The floors had to be scrubbed of all the mud the enthusiastic, if culturally insensitive, fez wearing American pseudo Muslims had tramped into the building. They didn't care. You see, they don't care about the religious part. They're not paying respect to the temple and what the people are doing. They're actually praying. And then instead, they're just going in there like fans and just spectating what they're doing, dirtying up the floor. They're calling them insensitive, fez wearing American pseudo Muslims. I didn't say it, had tramped into the building. Many Shriners seemed to treat this solemn ceremony as a huge joke, which was more or less the modus operandi of the Shriners in general, and struck some onlookers as sacrilegious and terribly offensive. The Greek supervisor of the Egyptian mummy display barred Shriners that afternoon since they were so rowdy and disrespectful. Still, the fact that there was a functioning mosque at an exposition dedicated to the memory of Christopher Columbus, that's the hijack, Sarco, you mean Salvador Fernandez Sarco, who allegedly hated the infidel Saracen, struck some as deliciously ironic. This is so bogus, right? He was a Sephardic Jew and he had many Saracens on his crew, Moorish brothers and his crew. All right. Shriners were not only largely ignorant of the religious practices of Muslims, the American Turks, in parentheses, these are black folks, guys, were also unaware of political divisions among denizens of the Ottoman Empire. One American Shriner got himself in trouble when trying to gain admission to a restricted portion of the Egyptian exhibition by displaying a Shriner badge with a scimitar, two tiger claws, the head of the Sphinx, and the Star of the Orient. The Egyptians saw the symbol as signifying allegiance with the Turkish Ottomans and became hopping mad to the point that the Shriner began to fear for his safety. He wondered where was the link at the mystic shrine that made brethren of these men of the East. According to his friend's account, certainly there must be a degree beyond the one brought back by the late Billy Florence, the founder of the nobles of the mystic shrine. If the Shriners were the playground of Masonry, then the ersatz Islamic Orient of the World's Fair was a veritable playground for Shriners. All right? So it is particularly appropriate that the World's Fair was the place where Shriners passed on the 21-year-old traditions of the ancient Arabic order to black Freemasons, guys. And where in the World's Fairs? Do you guys see the links? The key figure in this transmission was a black attorney from Chicago named John George Jones, who was born September 18th, 1849, in Ithaca, New York. At the age of 7, his family moved to Chicago, and when Jones came of age, he studied law under the tutelage of W. O'Brien, a noted criminal attorney. Jones passed the bar in the state of Illinois in 1881 became a law partner to Ida B. Wells' future husband, Ferdinand Barnett, and later was elected to the state legislature from Chicago. All right. At the time, Jones was the leader of Chicago's small Afro American community, or so called black community, the central figure around which the lesser lights gathered. He was a man of considerable eloquence and organizational acumen, whose unyielding opposition to racial discrimination earned him the nickname Indignation Jones. His rejection of segregation in any form led him to oppose the founding of a Negro YMCA in 1889 and also the establishment of Provident Hospital for Negroes in 1891. Jones also became a vociferous critic of Booker T. Washington, the Wizard of Tuskegee, and the most powerful black man in the country at that time. Whoa. When prominent Dr. Dan Williams remarked that Negroes were fond of secret societies and bright regalia, Jones called a meeting to censure Williams for defaming the race as frivolous, since the implication was that blacks spent too much time and money on fraternal activities that could have been better spent uplifting the so called race, in parentheses, right? But ironically, there was no more important to the multiplication and mutation of black Masonic regalia than Indignation Jones himself. It says here Prince Hall was a former slave who joined a Masonic lodge of British soldiers in 1775. All right, we're going to touch the hijack. We're going to have a full research and study eventually one day. We have mentioned a little bit about Prince Hall, but this whole, oh, he was a former slave. Don't think African. Don't think it might not have been indenture or an apprenticeship. Don't think it wasn't under his dad or a family member. All that. Like, we're going to break all that down when we get the real sources. All right. So it says here, we dodge the hijack when we hear it, right? Be ready. It says Prince Hall was a former slave who joined a Masonic lodge of British soldiers in 1775 and then formed the first Masonic lodge for men of African descent, or so-called black or Negro culture, right, or background. After the war, becoming the founder of Black Freemasonry. A century after Prince Hall, John George Jones became a prominent member of Chicago's Prince Hall Masonic Lodge, rising to the rank of Deputy Grand Master. That was John George Jones, the lawyer, right, an attorney. He was a Grand Master Prince Hall Mason, okay? In 1875. In 1887, however, he began to stray from Prince Hall orthodoxy, finding himself suspended and then reinstated in the same year on the charge of ignoring the orders of Masonic court. Around 1890, he began representing himself as the Sovereign Grand Commander of the United Supreme Council of the Southern and Western Masonic Jurisdiction, United States of America, all right? And began petitioning the Shriners' Grand Council of Arabia, seeking to be initiated into the shrine and to be vested with the power to organize shrine temples in the United States. All right, you hear what they doing? They plotting. On June 1st, 1893, Jones got his wish when a delegation in town for a Shriner convention timed to coincide with the World's Fair conferred the degree of ancient Arabic order of the nobles of the mystic shrine on Jones in impressive ceremonies at Chicago's 18-story Masonic Hall, right? What happened? The Shriners combined with what? With the Prince Hall people. When? In 1893. In where? In the World's Fair. In the Chicago World's Fair. You see what's going on, guys? Man, so much drop. All right? This is going to take some time to digest and understand the significance about all this. One day, we all will, though. Along with the initiation, the Shriners gave Jones the power and authority to confer the degree of the Mystic Shriner, to found temples, to create grand imperial councils, and to call himself imperial potentate of the Imperial Grand Council in the United States of America, all right? And then who else? Who would be calling himself all those things too? It sounds like Malachi York, right? Then he called himself almost something similar. All right, this is the seeds. This is what I'm saying. This is the origin of these and the movements and who's influencing these people to do all that. All right, eventually, later on. The head of the Shriner delegation called himself Noble Rofield Pasha, deputy of the Shriners, Grand Council of Arabia, and he was assisted by three others who likewise claimed to be from the Islamic Orient. All right, so a lot of these are again Americans, so-called black folks, joining, and now they're like, oh, we're from, with the Shriners from Arabia and all this. But that's just like the order of the red man, these Europeans dressing like Indians. What's the difference? According to one of Jones' successors, the others were S. Hussein of Syria, Turkey, Amel Kadar of Palestine, Turkey, and A.B. Bellet of the north of Africa, while representing their various countries at the Chicago World's Fair. So this is where they're gathering. You see what's really going on in the Chicago World's Fair, guys? Wow, this is deep, man. The following day, Jones convened 13 members of the local Prince Hall Masons in Chicago, just as 13 white Masons had met in New York to form the Mystic Shrine 21 years previously. And together, listen, Jones and his associates founded the black version of the Shriners, beginning appropriately enough with Palestine Temple. They followed that up before the end of the year with Mecca Temple in Washington, D.C., Jerusalem Temple in Baltimore, Maryland, Medina Temple in New York, Pyramid Temple in Philadelphia, and Persian Temple in Indianapolis, thus mapping ancient Egypt, the Orient, and the holy cities of the Islamic world onto some of the major Black American cities of the late 19th century. And where did they target? Where they set in shop? In the black neighborhoods and black cities. This is on purpose, guys. It all started where? In the Chicago's World's Fair. They're getting trained. They're regrouping, they're setting up, they're meeting, taking the meetings. It wouldn't be controversial because, oh, now everybody's just spectacles to show. People go see them. They pay 25 cents. Oh, that's just some Hindu dude. Oh, that's a Tunisian guy. Oh, that's not knowing that these are all Masons in the background. That's all a show. This is deep. The White Shriners noted the advent of a colored group as early as 1894, when their imperial potentate Thomas J. Hudson reported the existence of organizations of our colored fellow citizens who have pirated our title almost verbatim. Prince Hall Shrine historian Joseph Walks concludes that a member of the White Shrine was directly involved with Jones and his organizing the Prince Hall Shrine. Despite protests from some white Shriners in succeeding decades, others continued to supply their black counterparts with regalia and meeting places. Black Shriners faced dissension from within and without from the beginning, when a rival named Milton F. Fields emerged and began conferring the mysteries of the mystic shrine on fellow colored Masons. Okay? With the order split between a Jones faction and a Fields faction, Jones lost a bid for re-election as imperial potentate in 1895 and organized a rival Supreme Council. In 1897, Prince Hall Shrinerdom became further fragmented when ordinary John George Jones began expelling members en masse. In order to quell dissension between what had become three separate Black Shriner organizations, representatives of three of the first temples met in December of 1900 and formed the Imperial Council of the Ancient Egyptian, all right, emphasis added, Arabic order, nobles of the Mystic Shrine of North and South America and its jurisdictions. By placing Egyptian in their name, the Black Shriners were distinguishing themselves from the white organization with a reference to Africa that connoted both the contemporary Egypt of the Ottoman Empire and the ancient glories of the pharaohs that had long played a central role in Masonic legend, all right? But we're talking about real ancient Egypt. The Prince Hall Shrine's founder, Old Indignation Jones, got himself expelled from regular Prince Hall Masonry in 1903 for setting up a fraudulent Grand Lodge of Illinois without approval from legitimate Prince Hall organizations, and spent the remainder of his life until his death in 1914 feuding with other Black Masons, right? So, So it's a common thing for some folks to just create their own lodges and their own temples and their own movements out of nowhere, right? It was people were doing it before. Yeah, it was popular. Prince Hall shrine temples had spread rapidly, from 25 in 1895 to 61 in 1899. And with the white Shriners, the black Shriners' choice of temple names reflected their fascination with Islam and the Muslim Orient. There were temples named Allah, Sahara, Quran, Medina, Arabia, Mecca, Palestine, and Muslim. Of the 32 temples on the roster for the annual convention in 1909, only Birmingham's St. Joseph Temple and Oklahoma City's Great Western Temple lacked identifiably Arabic or Oriental names. So-called Black Americans interpreted the Orientalist myth at the heart of Shrinerdom differently than their white peers, just as Joanna Brooks has argued that Black Americans, so-called, developed their own interpretation of Freemasonry in general, whereas white Shriners tended to treat their origin legend as an elaborate joke. Black Shriners took a more reverent approach. As the decades progressed and Black Shriners started to come under attack from their white counterparts, they became even more deeply invested in their origin legend, which they used to argue that white Shriners were the ones who lacked authority to practice the ritual of the mystic shrine. Black Shriners used their origin story to distinguish themselves from white Shriners, arguing that they had received the ritual directly from the mysterious noble Rofield Pasha and the Grand Council of Arabia. In a speech given at the establishment of Jerusalem Temple, listen, at Baltimore, Maryland, in September of 1893, John G. Jones claimed that the ancient Arabic order of nobles of the mystic shrine of Masonry is possibly the most profound of all the mysteries of Masonry, for its origins bear internal evidence of its existence soon after the creation of the world. Likewise, Jones emphasized the uplifting and morally edifying nature of the order's ceremonies and principles, which promised to unite men, to teach Solomon important lessons of truth and justice for all, and to promote the evangelization of man, and the promotion and practice of Christian faith. Evangelization of what? Christian faith. That's why you find Jesus all over. We're talking about the Aquarius writings of Jesus all over the Circle 7 Quran. Blacks and whites also related to the Orient very differently in the era known as the Nadir. For Black Americans, when lynching and Jim Crow segregation attained a new ferocity, the most common attitude in white shrine literature is one of overwrought reverence for Islam and the Orient. However, it was not uncommon for white Shriners to associate Arabs with Africans and to connect both with denigrating stereotypes of Black Americans. And one illustration for a function of the White Islam Temple in San Francisco, California, an elephant threatens an Arab, drawn with the cartoonish buggy eyes and exaggerated lips, both tropes of American racist caricatures of Black people. In contrast, Black Shriners used the mystique of the Orient to advance the cause of the uplift and progress of the race. At the 12th annual session of the Imperial Council of the Black Shriners, held in Detroit in 1910, Imperial Potentate Jacob F. Wright melded the vocabulary of Islam into the language of the Exodus narrative, portraying Detroit as an oasis in the Michigan desert. Many years ago, he said, there lived in the minds of a people who had 4 years been driven by hard taskmasters, that somewhere on the northern boundary of our country, situated between two lakes, was the gateway to a country of human liberty. He began employing the poetic language of Black American spirituals that turned the South into Egypt and the North into a metaphorical promised land. Then he superimposed the Holy Land of Islam on top of the Holy Land of Judaism, Christianity, and the spirituals. Many struggled in vain for this Mecca, Potentate Wright continued, but to many others the dream became a living reality. For Black Americans living in the age of Southern horrors, the struggles for the Mecca of Detroit were very current. The warm reception our caravan of the faithful received there made each pilgrim feel that life is worth living in Detroit. You guys see? So remember what we were reading about Wali Fard, Muhammad Fard, the founder of the Nation of Islam, you know, how he was a peddler, also had this mystic origin, you know, possibly coming out of these same lodges, before creating his own, right? How he was, like taking advantage, not taking advantage, but going into the people who were kind of desperate coming out of the South. Then the Great Depression hits, and then now people are kind of just looking for hope in something, right? And now you got all these Shriners offering the hope, right? So they're saying, oh, they welcomed us here. As Shriners, black men were metaphorical pilgrims to the Mecca of the North, living Judeo Christian and Islamic mythology simultaneously. Negro Shriners consciously used the language of uplift to describe the mission of their organization, which Imperial Potentate Eugene Phillips stated in Atlantic City in 1911, means so much for the advancement and uplift of our race. Conversely, the factionalism among Prince Hall Shriners was a retardation not only of the progress of our order, but of the race as well. In 1913, Phillips, addressing a gathering in Indianapolis, defined the work of the order as alien the suffering of humanity, which is so wretched and so sadly in need of love. The duty of members was never to lull their conscience to sleep while there is one soul suffering from the injustice of his brother, whether that brother be black or white. Rather, they should give a cool drop of water of encouragement to every Effendi. Oh, yes, to every man, be he Sayyid or be he Fella, whenever he needs our assistance as he journeys by the oasis of our desert. All right, metaphor, metaphor, metaphor. Phillips continued at a full gallop. Illustrious sons of the desert, the day is now here upon us and about us when we must confer and consult for the good of the race to which we have the honor to belong. Rather than simply making merry in Indianapolis, the gathering was a time to consecrate the solution of the great questions of justice and righteousness, of the unity of Allah and the brotherhood of man. And all of this was to be done to glorify Christ in the spirit of that lowly one, the man of sorrows. For Black Americans, not only was the Africanness of Moorish and Islamic peoples a source of pride, but the foreignness of the Orientalist ritual of the mystic shrine provided a lifeline outside the racism of American shores. This is what I was saying. This provided some kind of hope to these people. And they knew that this was happening, guys. Like they created these movements in times when people were actually looking to follow somebody, looking for a leader, looking to get out of their sorrows, their life, their oppression. It says, as Masonic historian Joseph C. Walks explains, some of the motivation for the creation of the Shriners came from the need of Black Americans to be recognized outside of their own communities. And such recognition coming from a Grand Council of Arabia, from a mysterious foreign land, perhaps was the spark. Perhaps that's what we can say. For Black Americans, the mystic shrine was a way of staking a claim to the world's most ancient mythology, while also building fictive ties, fictive or fictional, right? That's what it means, fictional ties to a global imagined community of Shriners, Masons, and Muslims. That's fiction. Freemasonry contained many references to both Israel and Egypt, yet the main referent for the initiation rituals of both branches of the mystic shrine was not Judaism or Christianity, but Islam. The rites of the nobles of the mystic shrine became an important inspiration for the rites of Black Muslim sects. Again, here we go. This is what I was saying. Pay attention. The rites of the nobles of the mystic shrine became an important inspiration for the rites of Black Muslim sects in the United States because the rites were suffused with Islamic legends, myth, and passwords. What is the magic word? You got to say the magic word to come in. Black Muslim sects, right? Wasn't Noble Drew Ali a part of the nobles of the mystic shrine, ancient mystic shrine, Egyptian? Come on now, go back to my other videos. The opening words of the Shriners' ceremonial explaining their initiation rites were, my friends or nobles of the mystic shrine, The order with which you have become united was founded by Muhammad and has as its background the trackless desert of Arabia and the fearless, devoted, and barbaric Arab. So that's what they were telling each other, right? All initiates were made to cross the hot sands, which represented the perilous journey of the first Muslim pilgrims to Mecca. Initiates promised to worship at the shrine of Islam and cleanse themselves in a pool meant to signify the well of Samsam, or alternatively, Samsam, where Islamic tradition teaches that Hagar and her son Ishmael quenched their thirst when they were expelled from Abraham's tent. Initiates gave a grand salam and bow in imitation of Muslim prayer, and they kissed a representation of the Kaaba, the black stone that is the focal point of the annual Muslim pilgrimage to Mecca. Black and white Shriners alike swore on both a Bible and a Quran in their ceremonies and taught reverence for the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, who they claimed was the founder of their secret society. The Quran is the unique history of our founder Muhammad. Shriners of all races learned upon initiation. This is what they told them, right? The work is absolutely unique in its origin and its preservation, upon the authenticity of which no one has ever been able to cast a serious doubt. The Quran is the actual text as dictated by Muhammad himself, day by day and month by month, during his lifetime. It is the reflection of this mastermind, sometimes inartistic and self contradictory, more often inspiring and lyrical, and always filled with great ideas which stand out as a whole. In sum, the heart of the secret ritual of the Shriners was Islamic history and Islamic ritual. As they explained themselves, our whole ritualistic system is based upon these kindly attributes such as refinement, education, and moral integrity, together with an unflinching faith in Allah. One part of the initiation was intended to teach you to always renounce the wiles and evils of the world and promise to ever worship at the shrine of Islam, where the air is rich with the wisdom of Allah. Shriners swore a Muslim's oath to Allah, the God of Arab, Muslim, and Muhammad, and they used Muslim greetings such as Assalamu alaikum, peace be with you, and Alaikum Assalam, with you in peace. In their ceremonies, Shriners profess reverence for the Holy Prophet, the Holy Quran, and the Holy City of Mecca. They reenacted Islamic history, they spoke Arabic phrases, and they identified not simply with Arabs, but as Arabs. Okay? Who lied and said, oh, he was born in the land of Mecca, he came from there. Remember what we learned about Wali and what Elijah was saying? Who identified, they tried to identify, right? Where are they getting all this influence? It was all before the Moorish Science Temple and before the Nation of Islam. This is all happening, right? Where did it get started? Where did it set off? In the world's fairs. In the world's fairs. Intense theatrical rituals, some of which the Shriners designated as sacred, performed a kind of magical alchemy in part by disorienting and frightening initiates. The nobles became fictive Muslims in theatrical Arabia, okay? The what? These Masons, they became what? Fictional Muslims in a theatrical Arabia. The initiation lecture proclaims, this city in which you now stand is the holy city of Islam, situated in the desert of Arabia. Shriners, both black and white, luxuriated in this Islamic Orientalist role playing. You have made the road clear for the journey of your camels. The black imperial potentate told his charges in 1909, I find it an easy task to ride through the desert of burning sand to an oasis of success. Nobles of the mystic shrine of all races imagined themselves into a global community of Muslims stretching back chronologically to the 6th century and spatially across the chasm of oceans to the Islamic majority countries of the mysterious Orient. It says so-called Black American Masons, Shriners, Elks, Knights of Pythias, and others played vitally important roles in the civic and social lives of Black communities in the 20th centuries, okay? It's all done on purpose. These movements, these so-called leaders, they planted agents, especially as the seedbed of political organizing and new alternative religions, political organizing. As so called Black Americans moved north in the Great Migration, and as West Indians joined them in places such as Harlem, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Detroit, they formed dozens of benevolent insurance and fraternal associations to go along with new mainline churches, storefront churches, social clubs, political clubs, athletic clubs, and literary societies. For example, Freemasonry and its derivative secret societies played a central role in the social life of Harlem in the 20s, second only to the church among black organizations in terms of members and influence. The Elks, Prince Hall Masons, and Odd Fellows all had several thousand members, and there were dozens of secret societies that battled each other for legitimacy, and members fraternal organizations came under fire in the black press for spending most of their funds on regalia and conventions and offering little tangible benefit to the community. Some even argued that they retarded the progress of the race by diverting energy and time that could have been used for more constructive purposes. Yet there is evidence that secret societies played an important role in Negro political life in the 20s. All right, all these leaders are coming out, and in future decades, large meetings provided not only fellowship but opportunities to develop skills in public speaking, politicking, and parliamentary procedure. Lodges provided safe spaces in which to air racial grievances and imagine a future of greater economic justice. One Harlem Lodge member explained, all right, the reason these fraternal meetings last so long into the night is that all week the colored man in his job under a white man has had little things that make him mad and that he can't talk out loud about. These things pile up inside of him, and when he gets on the fraternity floor among his own folks at the meeting, that just bows out of him and laying down the law and asserting his rights to his own brethren. And it's his turn to tell other folks where they get off and how he does tell them. Lodges constituted a black public sphere and provided more privacy than churches, and thus allowed for even franker discussions of the slings and arrows suffered at the hands of whites, so called whites. The meetings were governed by laws, and the men who gathered there asserted their rights as liberal subjects in the context of a wider society that frequently fell short of the ideals of equality penned by the Masonic founding fathers of the United States. Historian Margaret Jacob has argued that European Masonic lodges were laboratories of democracy, where people living underneath repressive autocratic regimes of the 18th century learned skills critical to participation in democratic society. It is quite possible that secret societies and other clubs played an equivalent role among Black Americans, training members in oratory, parliamentary procedure, and voting in times and places where the punishment for blacks voting could be death. While the mainstream of both regular Masons and Prince Hall Masons have tended to be burghers and conformists, composed primarily of professional members, at their margins their religious dimensions have been more pronounced. Masonic lodges may have helped to create black citizens and liberal subjects, but viewing black Freemasonry as primarily Borgias obscures a dense thicket of political dissent and religious energies connected to Freemasonry that has flourished among the black working class. Because of its highly developed secret rituals, its alluring promise of hidden knowledge, all right, hidden knowledge, secret rituals, that's what you guys like, huh? And its custodianship of ancient mysteries, Freemasonry cultivated religious belief and inspired the formation of numerous religious sects. Inspired what? Re- Wahhabism, Nation of Islam, Moorish science, huh? Whereas the history of the establishment of the African American Prince Hall Freemasonry is well documented, the story of the dozens of alternative forms of Black Freemasonry is much less well known. These various forms of alternative Freemasonry not only served Black men and women of lower classes and statues, but they also were more commonly interracial in composition and invoked the transnationalism of the oppressed. All right, interracial. That's how Wally was able to join. He wasn't from the Americas. He might be from Pakistan, Afghanistan, the Mediterranean. A whole lot of origin stories on him, right? We've gone over them. So, throwing their lots not with the European colonial powers, but with the colonized nations of the global south. Finally, alternative African American Freemasonry was critical to the development of a sympathetic form of Black Orientalism that helped to generate many of the alternative so called Black American religions of the 20th century. From the Black Israelism of Bishop William Saunders, listen, Crowdy, these are all future videos. We're going to get into all this. And Rabbi Wentworth, Arthur Matthew, to the Black Spiritual Church of Father George W. Hurley, and the Black Islam of Noble Drew Ali, and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Okay, I told you these were the seeds. Where did all these people get influence? What were they following? Who were they following to get involved? You guys never asked that. The refusal of most so-called white Masons to recognize their Black Prince Hall counterparts encouraged the mushrooming of religious sects from the soil of Prince Hall Freemasonry. Non-Prince Hall Black Masons asserted their own claims to legitimacy, for example, by deflecting challenges to their legitimacy back upon their Prince Hall accusers, arguing that the Prince Hall lodges were themselves irregular. Much of the literature written by Prince Hall Masons either defends the legitimacy of their own Masonic charter and its lineage from Prince Hall himself, or attacks those purveyors of bogus, clandestine, or spurious Black American Masonry, recognized or standard. Prince Hall Masons were eager to condemn those they considered illegitimate, partly in an effort to gain legitimacy in the eyes of the wider Masonic world. In 1925, the New York World announced a vigorous campaign to out illegitimate Masonic bodies on the part of standard Prince Hall Masons, who seemed to think the public had been unintentionally given the false impression that all Negro Masonic lodges are bogus. Listen, they were like, no, we don't want to associate with them because they're just creating fake Masonic lodges without our consent or the way it's supposed to be done, right? The Prince Hall Masons contended that one's Masonic legitimacy was not determined by race, and made that argument in part by emphasizing the questionable legitimacy of many lodges of foreign origins. The grandfather of many of the unrecognized Prince Hall lodges was none other than the founder and first imperial potentate of the Black Shriners, John G. Jones, who began to organize unauthorized lodges in New York City with associate Bishop Jesse B. Thornton after his expulsion from a standard Prince Hall lodge in 1903. Remember, he had been given the privilege because he was a Prince Hall Mason in the World's Fair by the Shriners to, okay, they initiated him as a Shriner and said, okay, you can open shrines too, temples and all that. And then when he got kicked out of Prince Hall, he started doing his own thing after 1903, right? Lacking the central controls that put a check on doctrinal and ritual innovation among Prince Hall Masons, alternative Freemasons, both black and white, were free to innovate and mutate, driven by charisma, opportunity, or the marketplace, that money. The central charges raised by Prince Hall Masons against the orders was that unscrupulous people were selling the secrets of the order as a money-making venture. It's all about that money bag, man. In some spurious lodges, the officers of the association ran the organization as a racket and simply divided up a percentage of the lodge's earnings among themselves. Wow. The multiplication of Black Masonic organizations led to general confusion and great consternation among Prince Hall Masons, who admitted that even well-meaning people could be confused about which organization was genuine and which was spurious. Indeed, unrecognized Black American Masons sometimes even used the name Prince Hall as when they used the terms Prince Hall origin, Prince Hall affiliation, and Prince Hall descent. Oregon Prince Hall Grand Master Fred Hartman predicted in 1946 that if his branch of the fraternity did not take unofficial action to stem the tide, those unrecognized bodies would eventually overwhelm the Prince Hall institution. 8 years later, Prince Hall Masonic historian Harry Williamson concluded that overwhelming is rapidly progressing. There were 18 unrecognized African American Masonic organizations in New York City in 1954, and two of them together had more members than all of the legitimate Prince Hall bodies. Wow, and they're just letting anybody in too. That's the other thing. All told, there were four times more alternative Black Masons in New York than standard Prince Hall Masons. Statewide, the situation was even more chaotic, as the world of clandestine Prince Hall lodges was prone to infighting and fragmentation. Former partners Jones and Thornton were even said to have expelled each other from the same Grand Lodge. In a world in which Prince Hall Masons recognized the authority of only one Grand Lodge, there were an astounding 14 competing Grand Lodges of Negro Masons in New York State alone by 1954, claiming a total of over 60 affiliated lodges. Texas had about 20 Black American Masons who all styled themselves the Grand Master of the state. You see what these guys are doing, man? They're just trying to make that money, unfortunately, man. Nationwide, there were at least 90 non standard Prince Hall Black Masonic organizations by the mid 20th century. Often, arguments about Masonic legitimacy spilled into the dockets of the public courts, and Black Shriner legal battles to protect their rights to observe their ritual paved the way for landmark civil rights cases later at mid century. In two path breaking cases, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned state courts' ruling barring blacks from practicing fraternalism. In 1912's Creswell versus Grand Lodge Knights of Pythias of Georgia, and 1929's Ancient Egyptian Arabic Order of Nobles of the Mystic Shrine versus McCox, the highest court in the land ruled that white Masons had abrogated their copyright and trademark rights by not defending them. The rulings confirmed the viability of using the courts to seek redress for violations of Negro in parentheses civil rights, a strategy that would become a central to the Black freedom struggle in the post-war era. In 1914, the year after Professor Drew, remember he was calling himself the Egyptian adept Professor Drew, all right, the name Thomas. In the year 1914, he founded Newark's Canaanite Temple. It was actually Suleiman who founded that, guys. We got the video, all right? There's a whole thing I want you to go check out real quick. Let me show you. So this is the video right here, guys. This is about a year ago or more, almost 2 years now. It's called Abdul Hamid Suleiman, founder of the Canaanite Temple with a question mark. It says 96-degree high priest of Mecca, huh? Now, is he really a high priest of Mecca, or did he just give himself that name and title and origin? Now that we're learning things more, right? Look at that, the crescent moon, the fez, high Egyptian mason. You see, there was a lot of these people, guys, before Drew Ali, before Wally Fard, Elijah Muhammad and all these people. Malachi York, there was a bunch of them. Those were the people who influenced the others. They were more modern. They had more of an impact, and their movements lasted until today. But they weren't the only ones or the origin of these things, right? Okay, like it says in that book, it says Drew Ali was the founder, but it was actually this guy. He was under Suleiman for a while. All right, check out this video if you haven't, so you can see the research. All right, this is about 30 minutes long only. Check it out. All right, let's go back to the book. So let's just go with the story here. It says, so when they founded, the Newark's Canaanite Temple, Noble Drew Ali, right? It says, Noble W.O. Murphy of Medina Temple, number 19, New York, remarked on the splinter groups or spurious lodges. So they're calling Drew Ali's Canaanite Temple one of the spurious lodges, not accepted by the Prince Halls or even the legit Shriners, being formed around the country, and suggested that the Prince Hall Shriners take some action to eradicate them. Prince Hall Masons may not have accepted or liked the fact that Freemasonry was permitting this alternative and somewhat shadowy alternative religious sphere, but there was little that they could do about it. All right. And that's the end of this chapter. Wow. That was a pretty good drop in this chapter, meaning the connection there with the whole origin there in the World's Fairs in Chicago, Chicago out of all places, what the history there with, all these so-called black movements and stuff, right? So I hope you guys enjoyed the reading. I thought it was really, really deep. I know that if you guys go back into my more science videos and all these other videos that I showed you, told you to go watch, and some other ones, so many of them, right? You start connecting them all, you see why I'm saying this was a major drop here, and proving to me that this was done and created. These movements were funded and created, right? And these people, again, we read the book or chapter 3 of the book, The Princess and the Prophet: The Secret History of Magic, Race, and Black Muslims in America by Jacob S. Dorman. Get the book if you like it, support the author. Thanks for the drop, author. This is under fair use for education, critique, and for us learning. That was the mission. I know you wrote this so we can know this stuff. So we're learning, we're just analyzing, putting it all together, grabbing, the jewels out of here, the diamonds, picking out the drop, dodging the hijacks. You all know what's up. I appreciate you guys very much taking the time to come to my channel, hear me read all the way to the end on these longer videos. I hope you found this very interesting. I know a lot of you do. I know a lot of you are going to enjoy this video as much as I did. I enjoyed reading it and putting and grabbing some more info I needed to fill in some holes I had. All right. But check out part 1 of this reading, or the first 2 chapters that we read, so you can see what he's saying about Drew Ali and this guy named Walter. Either way, we know Drew Ali was before, he was into the same kind of life, doing writing circuses, magician, selling medicinal healing potions, being a shaman, fortune telling, all that. All right. And he was this mystic guy from the Orient. He fit the role. All right. The spectacle. Again, thanks for being here, guys. I'll give you your time back. Much love and respect. Pura vida, mi gente. Wow.
Robin Trey, Tracy Black.